What's that? What?
When you ask someone about the Capcom franchise that they love and they want more games of, the most common answers are usually Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Dragon's Dogma, and sometimes they can even remember old games like Dino Crisis or Clock Tower. There's always the group of people who are keeping up by playing the new games as soon as they come out, and they want more sequels. And there's also the other group that feels nostalgic and wants some of the classics to come back. However, for some reason, there's one specific franchise that seems like no one remembers, as it never happened, even though at some point millions of people enjoyed it. It's a game that I personally remember how I was rushing to go home just to play it, because I felt that it has something unique that only Dead Space brought to the table later on. Long story short, ladies and gentlemen, the franchise I'm talking about is none other than Lost Planet. And if you're someone who was gaming during the 2000s, then this name probably hit your memory directly and took you to an amazing era of gaming that goes back decades. It also makes you feel like it's something from ancient history that's not relevant anymore and has been buried forever. In this video, I want to highlight this game and bring it from the graves again, so we can understand its rise and fall, and how it lost its place in the gaming space indefinitely. So, without further ado, let's start. The year is 2006. Xbox 360 and PS3 are still new consoles, and people are excited to play on them and can't wait to buy one. However, unlike the current generation, Xbox in that time was a completely different beast, and it took the world by surprise by releasing their new console, the 360, in a time that even Sony wasn't ready for. This was November 2005 when the 360 blew people's minds away, and it literally took Sony one more year to release their console, the PS3, in November 2006. This gap between the two consoles' release dates was confusing not only for gamers, but also for developers who already started adapting to the 360 way before the PS3 hit the stores. And believe it or not, PlayStation's entrance into that generation was technically the worst in its history, while Xbox was getting more popular every day.
A little under a year ago, we shared with you and with the world our vision and technology for the PlayStation 3 format.
This led Microsoft to unleash their genius business tactics in a way you'll never see these days. Trust me. This actually brings tears to my eyes because when I remember how smart and competitive Xbox was, it makes me dislike the modern era of gaming more than ever.
This time, you're in control. We're putting you at the center of the experience. Welcome to Xbox 360.
Anyway, Microsoft wanted to take advantage of how the developers were familiar with their console early, and they insisted that they should have some cool games from those developers, but as exclusive to the 360, or at least timed exclusives. One of these developers was Capcom, and trust me when I tell you that Capcom's relationship with Xbox at that time was at its peak. They agreed to make multiple projects together, and one of these projects saw the light of day on December 21st, 2006, which was Lost Planet Extreme Condition. This is crazy because in that month, the PS3 was just 1 month old and barely starting the generation, especially since the console at that time was insanely expensive, by the way. It was basically a PS5 Pro moment for Sony in that generation. Yes. Anyway, when Lost Planet came out for the Xbox 360, I'm not exaggerating when I say that it turned the market upside down, and the entire gaming world felt its existence. The demo of the game alone was the second most downloaded on Xbox Live, and when the full game came out, it became the highest-selling Xbox 360 game in the US in just 2 weeks. The main reason for this is that it was the first game that made people feel it's actually next-gen, something that looks different and very polished. But the real question is, what was Lost Planet about, and how does it work? The events of the game unfold in the icy wasteland of Adian 3, a planet devastated by a brutal ice age. At the same time, humanity is on the brink of extinction on Earth, due to environmental disasters and war. And as a result, they decided to seek refuge and resources in the harsh new world. The protagonist here is Wayne Holden, a man who awakens from a cryogenic sleep with no memory of his past, except for the painful image of his father being killed by a colossal entity known as Green Eye. Wayne is full of anger and has a huge desire for revenge, which leads him to join a group of snow pirates who are resisting this deadly world and refusing to give up. However, the planet Adian 3 is not only hostile due to its climate, it's also inhabited by the Acrid, a race of insect-like creatures that thrive in the cold and fiercely defend their territory. These Acrid possesses a vital energy source called thermal energy, TENG, which is essential for human survival on the frozen planet. On the other side, the human settlers led by the powerful corporation Nevek are locked in a constant struggle with the Acrid for control over energy and dominance over the planet. But the plot actually gets more interesting, because Wayne eventually finds out that the corporation Nevek is led by a bunch of criminals and douchebags who want to weaponize the Acrid and unleash them upon the remaining humans. This means that the humans here are not only fighting the monsters, but they're also fighting each other due to their greed and obsession with power. I can't explain the plot any further without spoiling it, but the general point is that this is basically a post-apocalyptic world, but instead of being on Earth, it's on another planet. Food and energy here are very scarce, which leads to conflict even between humans because they are desperate to survive. If you played Resistance, then the concept would be very familiar to you. When it comes to the gameplay, this is actually the part that makes the game so fun. Thermal energy is crucial for survival here, and this means that you must always find and collect sources of this energy, whether from the environment, from defeated enemies, or by destroying special canisters. Without this energy, the player's life bar will slowly shrink, leading to death. This creates a constant sense of urgency and resource management throughout the game, which is really a cool feature in a survival horror game. Nevertheless, the environment here is also your enemy during gameplay because it poses other challenges, such as extreme cold and snowstorms. The main enemies here are the Acrid. They are giant, insect-like entities that come in various shapes, creating different threats for you, and you need different strategies to defeat them. But as I said before, not all humans on this planet are your friends. Nevek soldiers also engage in combat with you, and they give you more pain in the butt on top of all the other issues you're dealing with.
This area is under Nevek supervision. Leave while I'm still in a good mood.
Wait, watch yourself.
But don't worry, the game features a variety of weapons, including standard firearms, rocket launchers, and special tools that you get from the monsters. Furthermore, when things get too tough and you can't handle it anymore, you can use something called vital suits, which is the coolest part of the game. These are large mechanized suits scattered throughout the environments, and you can find them when you explore the areas. They provide significant firepower and protection, and some of them are even equipped with unique abilities such as flight or extra powerful melee attacks. But the problem is, they also consume a lot of energy to operate, which means you can't use them all the time, my friend. You also have a grappling hook that allows you to quickly traverse the environment, reach elevated areas, and even grapple onto a grid for close combat or to hijack suits. Long story short, when it comes to gameplay mechanics, this game has a lot, and it takes the details very seriously to make you feel that surviving this cruel planet is not a walk in the park.
The name is Basil. I have business with Solotov.
She must be talking about Yuri. Remember? Yuri's last name is Solotov.
What's the meaning of this?
The massive surprise and success of the game eventually led Capcom to feel it's not smart to keep it for one platform, and it would be better to unleash the game's full potential by making it available on other platforms, beside Xbox. And to be honest, I definitely agree with this move, because if you know me personally, you'll know that I don't like exclusives. I don't like exclusives, and I don't like exclusives. In my opinion, games should be on all platforms, and there should be no gatekeeping whatsoever. I don't get happy when I can play games that other people can't, just because they don't have the console that I have. In fact, when I enjoy a certain game, I can't wait to see other people play it, so they can share this joy with me and see how cool that game is. So after 1 year of its initial release on Xbox, Lost Planet finally landed on PC in June 2007, and then later on PS3 in 2008, when the console started to make some buzz in the generation to catch up with Xbox 360. And by the way, even though the PlayStation 3 ended up selling more consoles years later, I think most people can still agree that Xbox was the biggest winner in that generation for multiple reasons. First of all, the only reason PlayStation sold more is because of their influence in the European market, which is a market that was not a big fan of Xbox prior to that generation. The unbelievable popularity of the PS1 and PS2 gave the PS3 a huge advantage in that region, because most people there automatically wanted the next console from Sony. However, even though Sony won that region overall, Microsoft was actually very happy with the performance of Xbox there. The fact that they sold 25 million consoles in Europe was a tornado in the market that almost put Sony in the second place.
Well, I'm excited to share that we're shipping the new Xbox 360 to retailers today.
On top of that, aside from Xbox's dominance in the North American market in that generation, the 360 also succeeded in marking its place in other regions, like the Middle East and South America, which were heavily PlayStation-centric before that era. As I said, this amazing competition makes me now sad, because when I remember the current generation, I feel depressed, very depressed. Anyway, let's get back to the subject, shall we? After the success of Lost Planet, the sequel was unavoidable, and everyone knew it was coming, soon or later. In 2010, Lost Planet 2 finally became a reality. And this time it came out on both consoles in the same day, so everyone can dive into it. The gameplay mechanics and elements I mentioned in the first game are all existent here. But the difference is the environment, because the sequel takes place 10 years after the original, and the planet Idian 3 has undergone significant changes, with the once frozen landscape now teeming with lush jungles and tropical places, because it is supposed to be a little bit more livable. However, that's not what makes the sequel special. The special part is that players can now control various factions across 6 episodes, experiencing the ongoing conflict from different perspectives. And even though the Akrid are not as common as in the original, they remain a threat. And there is also new, more dangerous species that have emerged. They are way bigger and more formidable in this installment, which means you will experience epic boss battles like never before. If you think the fun ends there, then you're wrong, because the campaign mode here can also be played with up to 3 other players online. Which means if you don't want to play alone, you can form a team with your friends and survive together. Even though the game had some optimization issues here and there, and the mainstream reviews were not very positive, it actually sold well and was considered a commercial success to a certain degree. However, there was a clear decline in both sales and interest in the game compared to the original, which started to cause some panic in Capcom's mind. It felt that the second game didn't have the charm that the first one had, and it's also not so unique anymore, due to the insane competition at that time. We're talking about 2010, a year when Mass Effect 2, Halo Reach, Metro 2033, and Fallout New Vegas are new games that are just coming out. This meant that the advantage that the first game had when it came out at the beginning of the generation is no longer a thing, because now there's actually some solid alternatives that gamers can choose to play instead. But despite this dangerous spot that the franchise found itself in, Capcom refused to give up, and they decided to keep Lost Planet alive. Which leads us to the last and most crucial game in the series, that was meant to decide its fate. The year is 2013. The PS3 and the 360 generation is reaching its last chapter. And so many amazing games and franchises have been revealed to the world already that made this generation insanely epic. We're talking about stuff like Dead Space, Resistance, Gears of War, and the list goes on and on. However, for a franchise like Lost Planet, it was the year for its battle for survival in a huge ocean of competition.
Please. Please say something.
Diana.
On August 27, Lost Planet 3 saw the light of day, and to be honest, you can clearly see the huge improvement when it comes to visuals. But in that time, visuals are not enough to stand out, because other games are stunning as well. So this one had to bring some new ideas to the table in order to catch people's interest. The story is basically a prequel, and the protagonist here is Jim Payton, a rig pilot who leaves Earth to take on a very lucrative contract on the planet EDN-3. He works for NEVEC, the organization I explained earlier, and they are preparing the planet EDN-3 for colonization so humans can come and live on it. In other words, the events here are before anything we saw in the first two games. The main focus here is colonization because the game explores the early stages of a human colonization on the planet, showcasing the challenges and dangers that they faced in that specific period. At the same time, there's also focus on the journey of Jim as a guy, and the story delves into his personal life, his relationship with his family on Earth, and even the sacrifices he makes to provide for them. At the end of the day, he is a family man. The gameplay here seems similar to the previous games, but it combines traditional third-person shooter mechanics with intense combat sequences using Jim's utility rig. The rig is very important in the game, and it basically serves as your home, offering you protection from the harsh environment and access to various tools and weapons. And considering that 2013 was a time when open-world games were more common, this one took advantage of that. The game features a larger, more open world to explore compared to the other two games, and this allows you to traverse more vast, icy landscapes and discover hidden areas that can reward your investigation. With that being said, the only question that matters is, did this game succeed and people loved it? Well, the short answer is no, not at all. Because despite all the stuff that I mentioned, gamers did not feel that there's anything new or innovative in the game. The story was okay and the atmosphere was good enough, but everything else was seen as repetitive, with no creativity at all, as if Capcom has no idea what to do in the series anymore. Sadly, this resulted in poor sales, and the commercial side was an absolute failure, even though Capcom did not expect it, because they spent a lot of money making this game. At this point, it was obvious this is a horrible news for the franchise's fans, especially when you realize that in those years, Capcom was in a complete financial disaster in general, and they were even close to going bankrupt. So they knew very well that there's no space for mistakes or taking risks anymore, which means that franchises that don't make money are going to be put in the basement or get buried indefinitely. And this is exactly what happened to Lost Planet. As a result, Capcom decided to put the series on hold and focus only on what can actually bring those dollars back. And when we talk about Capcom and dollars, you can be sure that Resident Evil is on top of the list. When I said Capcom was done with taking risks at this point, you can clearly understand that they decided to focus on their safe games that are guaranteed to make a profit in any case. And believe it or not, Resident Evil is the franchise that literally never disappointed the company. Because even when a Resident Evil game fails to impress the audience, it still makes a ton of money. For example, Resident Evil 6 is considered a flop by many people and one of the worst entries in this series. And yet, even that game sold more than 10 million copies. A number that's higher than the sales of the entire Lost Planet series, and you can even add Dead Space on top of it. This is crazy because Resident Evil is basically the only game that can reach these numbers in the horror genre in general. So from a business perspective, this gave Capcom a clear sign that using all their resources in the survival horror department to make better Resident Evil games is the best investment they can make. And little did we know, they were proven right in 2017, when the one and only Resident Evil 7 saw the light.
Where do you think you're going?
It was a completely new direction for the franchise, but in the best way possible. And I even see it as my favorite Resident Evil game ever made, because it combines everything I want in a AAA survival horror game, especially the psychological side. You can watch this video from Nerd Space Games and hear my segment to learn more about why it's my favorite and what made it special for me. Anyway, the financial impact of this game is what made the company double down on their new plan, because the money that they made from it did not only help them recover from their crisis, but it also helped them invest in making more insanely ambitious Resident Evil games, and that's why we got those stunning remakes in the last few years. In other words, guys, Resident Evil dominated Capcom's development capabilities for any survival horror project, and they don't even have time to bring games like Lost Planet back to life. It's simply not realistic. Rumors even say that 5 Resident Evil games are being made as we speak, to come out in the upcoming years, which shows the huge focus on this series more than anything else.
Hello, sister.
Anyway guys, this is all for today. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. And if you want to support the channel even more, you can join as a member for as cheap as $1. These videos are not easy to make, and we like to make more of them faster. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Lost Planet and whether you want it to be revived or you simply see it as something from the past that's not relevant anymore. I wanted to make this video so bad because I feel like no one remembers this franchise or even cares about its existence. It's kind of sad considering that it was a big thing at some point. Anyway, enough talking for now and see you in the next one.
Welcome to EDN3, Jim.